Welcome back, deep divers. Ready for another plunge into the world of the unexplained?
Always.
Well, today we're tackling a topic that's, let's just say it's larger than life.
Oh, I think I know where this is going.
You got it. We're talking about giants, those colossal figures that have haunted legends and folklore for, well, pretty much forever.
Yeah, giants. They've got that hold on the imagination, don't they? Across cultures, through history. There's something about those massive beings that just captures us.
Exactly. And you, our awesome listeners, you've sent us a mountain of articles and research. Clearly, you're just as fascinated by this as we are. So let's dive right in. We've got alleged giant skeletons, mysterious burial mounds, and even those biblical tales. Get ready to sift fact from fiction.
Sounds like fun.
Oh, it definitely will be. Let's start with those juicy 19th century reports, especially from the U.S. newspaper headlines screaming about skeletons like 12 feet tall, unearthed from ancient burial mounds. Talk about sensational.
Right, and a lot of these supposed discoveries were tied to the Adena culture.
The Adena. Remind me about them.
They were a prehistoric Native American culture, mostly in the Ohio River Valley. And their burial practices, they were remarkable. Huge mounds, some spanning acres filled with artifacts, and occasionally human remains.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection here. Big mounds, maybe big skeletons, but those 19th century reports, how reliable were they really? Back then, newspapers weren't exactly known for their rigorous fact-checking.
Exactly. And photographs, almost non-existent. So there's that.
But couldn't some of these ancient folks just have been genetically, predisposed to being taller than average? I mean, height varies today, so why not back then too?
True. Human height has gone up and down over time, different regions, different factors. But to pin those alleged giant skeletons solely on genetics, that's a bit of a stretch.
Okay, I'm following. So if it's not just genetics, what else could explain these extraordinary heights?
Well, medical conditions could offer a more plausible explanation for at least some of those cases.
Like
gigantism, for one. It's caused by too much growth hormone, usually because of a tumor on the pituitary gland, leads to, you guessed it, excessive growth. We're talking individuals exceeding 7-8 feet tall.
So we're in, Robert Wadlow territory here.
Mm-hmm.
He was the tallest man ever recorded, right? Something like 8'11".
You got it. Robert Wadlow's case, that's classic gigantism. So not a mythical giant, but still, his height was extraordinary, all because of a medical condition.
Makes sense. What about other conditions?
Well, there's acromegaly. It usually happens in adulthood. Same trigger, too much growth hormone, but it mainly affects the bones in the hands, feet, and face. They get bigger.
So we're not saying that unusually tall people didn't exist. We're just saying that maybe some of these seemingly impossible heights, especially those from those old-timey reports, could be explained by, medical stuff.
Right on. And you know what else is interesting? Even the soil conditions can mess with how remains are preserved. Over time, bones can get distorted, warped, all because of the pressure from the dirt around them.
Huh, okay. But wouldn't people notice if a skeleton looked, way bigger than it should?
You'd think, right. But don't forget, back in the 1800s, archaeology was just getting started. They didn't have the techniques, the tools we have today, to date, remains, analyze bone structures.
So a slightly larger than average skeleton could become a legendary giant in the retelling.
Exactly. Especially if you add in the human tendency to, shall we say, embellish a story, it all adds up.
Okay, so maybe giants are more of a Hollywood thing than a history thing. Case closed.
Well, not so fast. You can't just dismiss the power of myth and legend. And speaking of legends, let's talk about the Nephilim. Straight out of the Bible. Described as the offspring of sons of God and daughters of men. They've been sparking imaginations for centuries.
The Nephilim, huh? But how do we go from those biblical tales to, actual bones in the ground? Is there even a real connection there?
That's where things get a bit murky. Some people try to link the Nephilim to these giant skeleton discoveries, but there's just no scientific basis for it.
Yeah, the Nephilim always felt more like a cautionary tale to me, about hubris, overreaching, not so much a literal description of a race of giants.
That's one way to interpret it, for sure. And the Bible, it doesn't exactly give us clear-cut answers. It's more like hints and whispers, so different interpretations pop up.
Like what?
Were they mighty warriors, fallen angels, literal giants? The text leaves it open.
So maybe that ambiguity, that's what keeps these stories alive. They evolve over time.
Precisely. No concrete details. Well, that means we can project our own fears, our fascinations onto these figures. Which brings us to another fun part of this whole giant phenomenon. The hoaxes.
Oh, yeah. Like that photo from 1931 supposedly showing a giant skeleton. It was totally fake, right?
100%. It's a prime example of how easy it is to manipulate images, even before Photoshop and all that.
I read that the photo was part of a contest, like a spot the fake thing. But then it went viral. It became proof for those who wanted to believe.
It shows you how much we want to believe, right? We're hungry for evidence, even if it's not real.
So what have we got so far? 19th century reports, some medical explanations, and a good dose of biblical legend. It's a recipe for confusion.
And confusion, it breeds misinformation. But you know what? It also opens up some fascinating questions. Like, why are we so drawn to these stories in the first place? What is it about giants that hooks us so deeply? We'll dive into those questions in the next part of our exploration. Stay tuned.
Okay, so let's pick up where we left off. We've talked about hoaxes, and those possible medical explanations for some of these taller than average skeletons. We even touched on the Nephilim, but like you said, there's just no scientific evidence to back it up. But I'm still stuck on this question: why are we so drawn to these stories, even when we know that they're probably not true?
It's a good question. It's one that anthropologists and even psychologists have been trying to figure out for years. It seems like our brains, they just love stories. And giants, well, they're the perfect characters for a really good story,
Yeah.
Bigger than life, literally.
I mean, yeah, you think about it. I mean, how many cultures have giants in their myths and their folklore and stuff like that? It's almost like, they're this universal archetype, this fascination with beings that are familiar, but also totally extraordinary.
Exactly. And those stories, they often have a deeper meaning than just being entertaining. They can be a way for people to explain things they don't understand. Things like natural disasters or strange geological formations, or even the mysteries of where humans came from.
So you're saying that our love for giant stories is all in our heads, just a way to make sense of the unknown or to spice up history with a bit of fantasy.
That's part of it, for sure. But there's also this element of wonder, this sense of possibility. If we found real evidence of giants, it would completely change everything we thought we knew about history and human evolution. It's that what if that keeps people searching, even when the evidence is thin.
Okay, but that doesn't really explain why those hoaxes, like that 1931 photo, why they spread so fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
People were just looking for a cool story, were they? I mean, they wanted to believe it was real.
You're absolutely right. It goes deeper than just entertainment or wonder. It's about our need for meaning, our need to connect with something. Mm-hmm. These stories, whether they're about giants or Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, they can make people feel like they belong to something bigger than themselves.
So it's like these stories, they fulfill this need inside of us, a way to connect with our past or the unknown or even with each other.
That's it. And that's where the Nephilim, that's where they get really interesting. Their story, it's not just about giants. It's about these blurred lines between what's divine and what's human. It taps into this primal fear of the unknown, of forces beyond our control,
I guess that explains why the Nephilim, even though they're barely mentioned in the Bible, they've become so huge in pop culture.
Definitely. How they're described in religious texts has been reinterpreted over time, which, fuels that whole giant myth, gives it this, biblical justification for giants existing.
And those interpretations, they've made their way into, everything, right? Art, books, movies. I mean, look at how the Nephilim are shown in, Renaissance paintings, or even modern graphic novels. They've become a symbol for power, for mystery, even for rebellion, right?
And what's really cool is how those interpretations have changed as we've learned more about the world, as science has given us more solid explanations for things. The Nephilim have shifted from these beings with real power to symbols of something more, more abstract, something that makes us question what's really possible.
So even though the scientific evidence for giants might be lacking, the stories themselves, they still stick with us because they touch something deeper, something about our relationship with the unknown and wanting to find meaning in the world around us.
It's that spark of curiosity that drives discovery, And while looking for actual evidence of giants might be a scientific dead end, it's the questions those stories make us ask. That's what matters. They make us think about where we fit in all of this, about the limits of what we know, about the power of our own imaginations.
So we've kind of established that giants, they have this hold on our collective imagination.
Yeah.
But let's try something. Okay, what if we said, okay, maybe there's a tiny bit of truth in these stories. What are some other explanations we could explore?
Oh, now you're talking. Now things get really interesting. If we kind of step outside of, normal scientific thinking, what other possibilities are there? What if these stories are based on, I don't know, misinterpretations of natural events or optical illusions or even ancient technologies that we've, lost and haven't rediscovered yet?
Now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
It's like putting on our what-if hats and just letting our imaginations run wild.
Exactly. And this is where you come in, dear listeners. What do you think might be the real story behind these tales of giants? We want to hear your thoughts, your theories, your wildest guesses.
Maybe there are pieces of truth hidden in those myths, just waiting for us to find them. Or maybe they point to something completely different, something we haven't even thought of yet, like what ancient civilizations with super advanced tech that we don't understand. Or maybe there's this natural phenomenon that makes things look way bigger than they are.
Or maybe, just maybe, there are still places on this planet that hold secrets beyond our wildest dreams. Places we haven't even discovered yet.
I love that. It's a good reminder that we still have so much to learn about our own planet, let alone the universe. I mean, who are we to say that giants couldn't be part of that mystery?
Right. While it's important to be skeptical, to not just believe everything we hear, it's also important to keep an open mind. Just because something hasn't been scientifically proven doesn't mean it's not worth exploring, right? As long as we're clear about the difference between what's actually been proven and what's just an idea.
You know what they say? The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. Just because we haven't found a real giant skeleton doesn't mean they never existed.
Exactly. And who knows? Maybe one day someone will make a discovery that changes everything we thought we knew about human history. But until then, the search goes on.
I think that's a perfect way to lead into the final part of our deep dive. We'll wrap things up and leave you with some final things to think about. All right, so we've been on this journey, haven't we? From ancient burial mounds to biblical stories, from scientific explanations to just pure speculation about giants. It's been quite a ride.
Yeah, it really has. It's amazing how these stories of giants, they keep grabbing our attention, even though there's no real solid proof.
It makes you wonder though, what if giants, like in the way we usually picture them, what if they didn't exist? Could there be another reason for all these stories and these supposed discoveries? Maybe something we just haven't thought of.
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's funny, even when someone shows evidence that a particular giant claim is fake, a lot of people, they still want to believe. It's like the idea itself is just too good to let go of.
I wonder it's because, deep down, these stories kind of tap into, a primal fear of the unknown. Maybe it's a fear that's been passed down to us from way back when humans were, way more vulnerable, back when they were giant predators and stuff like that.
That's an interesting thought. Imagine early humans, They come across the skeleton of a mammoth or a giant sloth. Those skeletons are huge. It's not hard to see how those experiences, plus, a little bit of imagination, a little bit of storytelling, could lead to tales of even more incredible beings.
So maybe it's not really about literal giants then. Maybe it's more about our ancestors trying to understand a world that was full of dangers and things they couldn't explain.
And maybe those stories had a practical purpose too. Maybe they were cautionary tales to keep kids away from dangerous places or to teach them to respect nature,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's like those stories were a way to warn people about danger or to pass down important knowledge so they could survive.
Right. And as those stories were told and retold, they would have changed a bit, They would have been adapted to fit the beliefs and the culture of each new generation. So something that started as, I don't know, a simple observation like, hey, that's a big skeleton. Over hundreds of years, it could turn into this elaborate myth about a race of giants.
It's like a giant game of telephone, but with stories instead of words. And the farther those stories travel, the more fantastic they become, right?
Exactly. And the more they become a part of how we see the world. Even now, even though we have science to explain things, those stories, they still have power.
It's like they give us a peek into a different way of thinking,
Yeah.
A way of seeing the world through myth and wonder instead of just logic and facts.
It reminds us that science is important, but it's not the only way to understand things. There's also intuition and imagination and stories, and those things, they can help us understand ourselves and our place in the universe better too.
That's a really good way to put it. So even if we haven't found a real-life giant skeleton, we've discovered something else, haven't we? The power of myth and the human need to explore the unknown.
And maybe that's the most important thing we've learned from all of this. The search for giants, it might actually be a search for something much deeper, a search for meaning, for connection, for a sense of wonder in a world that's becoming more and more focused on logic and technology.
Well said. And you know what? Maybe, just maybe, there are still things out there waiting to be discovered. Things that will, like, shake up everything we thought we knew about the past and open up all these new possibilities.
Don't forget, the search for knowledge, it never really ends. It's about asking questions. It's about challenging what we think we know. It's about being open to new ideas.
It's about keeping that curiosity alive, that sense of wonder that makes us want to explore and to question and to never stop learning.
So keep those imaginations working, everyone. Never stop questioning, never stop exploring, and never, ever lose that sense of wonder about the world.
Until next time, happy exploring.